Hello, Accelerated Chemistry students. This is Ms. Krista Foley, and this is your first of many online notes that you will do this year. This is Chapter 1, Section 1, and it's all about the scope of chemistry. So first of all, what is chemistry? Chemistry is defined as the study of the composition of matter and the changes that that matter will undergo. So it also answers many questions you may have about the world that we live in. And it affects all aspects of life and most natural events because all living and non-living things are made up of matter. But you might be asking, what is matter? Well, matter is anything that has mass and occupies space. So everything that we know in this world that you have had contact with is matter. So trees, water, buildings, people, those things are all by definition matter because they all have a mass and they all occupy space. So chemistry is very interesting because chemistry is the overarching umbrella, and then there's 5 traditional areas of study that fall underneath chemistry: organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, biochemistry, analytical chemistry, and physical chemistry. Those are the 5 main subcategories that fall underneath chemistry. If you were to be a chemist and go to college to get your chemistry degree, you would take courses in all of these areas to make you well-versed in all of the concepts that encompasses each one of these. But we're going to break these down and talk about these specifically. So let's start off with organic chemistry. Organic chemistry is defined as the study of all chemicals containing carbon. So this is specific to carbon-containing compounds because carbon-containing compounds behave a certain way. So most chemicals found in organisms contain carbon, and an organic chemist might develop new lightweight plastics for flying discs. That's something that they could do in a laboratory. The next area of study is inorganic chemistry. This is the study of chemicals that in general do not contain carbon. So we have 2 big groups of chemicals. We have chemicals that contain carbon, which organic chemists study, and then we have everything else that do not contain carbon, and that's what we consider inorganic chemistry. So many inorganic chemicals are found in non-living things such as rocks, and an inorganic chemist might develop metal materials that provide strong structural parts for buildings. Another area of study is biochemistry. Biochemistry is the study of processes that take place in living organisms. So muscle contraction or digestion would be something that a biochemist would study. And they also might study how the energy used for contracting the muscle is produced and stored. Analytical chemistry is another area, and it's the study that focuses on the composition of matter. And an analytical chemist might measure the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That would be an experiment that they would do. And they might test the air for the presence of pollutants. So analytical chemists really are collecting data, analyzing that data, and having that data help push them in the right direction on how to solve that problem. Physical chemistry is another one. It is the area that deals with the mechanism, rate, and energy transfer that occurs when matter undergoes a change. So when we talk about chemistry, we defined it as the study of matter and the changes that it undergoes. Well, physical chemistry is going to talk about how that change happened. How fast does it? Does it require energy? If it does, where does it go? So a physical chemist might study the factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis in trees. So to speed up the photosynthesis process or slow down the photosynthesis process, that is what a physical chemist will study. And then we have these 5 categories, but these 5 categories are not specific. What does that mean? That means that these 5 categories will blend together. So a chemist will use more than one area of chemistry depending on what their project is, what their research is, what are they working on. So for example, an organic chemist will use analytical chemistry if they synthesize a new organic compound to determine what the composition of that compound is. Then we have 2 final ideas of chemistry. We have pure chemistry, which is the pursuit of chemical knowledge for its own sake. So this would be found and used if a chemist doesn't expect that there will be an immediate practical use for the knowledge. For example, when chemists were synthesizing nylon way back when, they didn't know what it would be used for. They just made the compound nylon. Same thing when they synthesized aspirin. They didn't know that it would be used in all of the ways that it is used in today's society. They just synthesized the new compound. That is pure chemistry, just producing more knowledge for chemistry, and that will encompass all of the umbrellas underneath chemistry. The other type of chemistry that we have is called applied chemistry. Applied chemistry is research that is directed toward a practical goal or application. So when you see applied chemistry, you're thinking about trying to solve a problem. So curing a disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, HIV, AIDS, cancer. Those are all areas and questions that chemists are working in today's society to try and solve. Another thing would be if we had a product. For example, when you go down the laundry detergent aisle in the supermarket, there's many different formulas for laundry detergent. And that is because some have found over the years that some laundry detergents fade your clothes. So chemists take that detergent and they make modifications to that detergent so that they do not fade your clothes anymore. That is applied chemistry. We're trying to solve a problem. Now, we've talked about the types of chemistry there are, but now let's talk about the big ideas in chemistry. And these are the things that we're going to cover in this course throughout the year. We're not going to cover them all at once. It's going to take us all year to get through most of these. So there's big ideas. So chemistry is the central science, electrons and the structure of atoms, bonding and interactions, reactions, kinetic theory, the mole and quantifying matter, matter and energy, and carbon chemistry. These are the main 8 big ideas that we will cover in this course. So let's talk about each of these in brief detail. So chemistry is the central science. So chemistry overlaps with all other sciences. Physicists, biologists, astronomers, geologists, environmental scientists, and others will use concepts of chemistry in their work. And we've talked about before how all those different subcategories of chemistry overlap. Chemistry is one of those sciences that if you are a chemist and you're doing research or you're working in a lab or you're working for a company, you need to know other facets of science in order for your project to work. Electrons and structures of atoms is the second big idea. Carbon, oxygen, and copper are all examples of elements, so you might be familiar with these. And elements are composed of particles called atoms, and every atom contains a nucleus and 1 or more electrons. And the type of products obtained in a chemical reaction is largely determined by the electrons in the reacting chemicals. All of these things we're going to discuss in grave detail. The next big idea is bonding and interactions. Most elements can exist in chemical compounds, which are collections of 2 or more elements held together by relatively strong attractive forces. The forces called chemical bonds greatly influence the properties of the compounds. And weak bonds between particles of an element or a compound can also contribute to the properties of the materials. We will discuss these in grave detail. That's why we have things that are hard, and that's why we have things that are soft. That's why we have things that behave certain ways under certain conditions. It's all because of the bonds that they made and the interactions they have between the particles. Reactions. Chemical reactions involve processes in which reactants produce products. So, for example, when we were striking a match and trying to light a bonfire over the summer, the head of the match combines with the oxygen in the air to produce a flame or fire. And new compounds along with light and heat were formed. And the compounds in the match head and the oxygen are our reactants, and the compounds and the new compounds that were made were the products. Heat and light can be products of a reaction. Kinetic theory is when we're talking about particles of matter constantly in motion. Now, this is going to be very interesting for some of us to understand, but we're going to go through this in a lot of detail in the future. And kinetic theory talks about the ways in which the motions of these particles will vary based on changes in temperature and pressure, and that will allow for us to determine whether something is a solid, a liquid, or a gas. The mole and quantifying matter. So in conducting a chemical reaction, you would want to use the right amount of reacting materials so none is wasted. And so this precise measurement is possible using the mole, and the mole is a unit that chemists have created over the years, and it is a unit that specifies the amount of material. Matter and energy. So every chemical process uses or produces energy in often heat form, and the heat changes that occur in a chemical reaction can be measured. And changes in a quantity called free energy allow for you to predict whether a chemical reaction will actually occur under the given conditions. And carbon chemistry is the last big idea that we're going to talk about this year. And so there are about 10 million carbon-containing compounds, with new ones being prepared each day, and those are being prepared by organic chemists. And many of these compounds are, including plastics and synthetic fibers, are produced from petroleum. And carbon compounds are the basis of life in all living organisms. So these are all the big things that we're going to talk about this year. And this is the end of your first set of notes, and I will see you tomorrow. And I just wanted to make sure that we all know that all the information for these Google Slides has been acquired and adapted from Pearson Chemistry, the 2012 edition of the textbook, Resources CD, and pearsonchem.com. Thank you.